Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Wait, more. Wait a second. Moira,
Yeah,
Moira, Moira. Okay. Welcome to Greensburg, Indiana.
I'm delighted to be participating in the series and to meet you all.
We're absolutely thrilled. And I do this. Normally, I do the semi-annual event called Chautauqua, where we bring in inspirational speakers and performers, really from around the world, not just the states. And so the pandemic hit, and we feel good about our possibilities of going in person in the fall. But it also gave us an opportunity to seek out people like you, to come here and play and educate us and inspire us. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have you. Of course, the focus will be the fiddle, but I believe you also play the violin and the viola. You have mega awards. You have a Grammy. You're a composer. You have a host of TV and film credits. It really is an honor. And thank you for joining Chautauqua.
Well, it's the honor is all mine. The pleasure is all mine, I have to say. Yeah, I hope I will live up to the introduction. So I'll just say a bit about myself first and then maybe play a tune. And then I suppose I made a few notes for myself to try and find a structure or some kind of a way of leading into it. So I grew up in Dublin on the east coast of Ireland. Now, I don't know if you can see this map here if I hold it up, but at the
Yes.
moment I'm in the yellow area down at the bottom, at the furthest west peninsula. And if you leave here and you go straight across the Atlantic, you'll end up at Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island. We're up that far. In terms of how big we are, we're slightly smaller than Indiana, so we're a drop in the ocean, really. But yeah, there's a huge tradition, as you're well aware, of music, and it's a kind of social history as well. There's a huge diaspora worldwide, which St. Patrick's Day always reminds us of, and that's just past now, and a lot of events took place online for that. So without more ado, I'll start and play a couple of reels. And to do this, I'm going to stand up while I'm still talking. I don't know if this is going to be successful, uh, and see if this will work. How is that picture-wise for you, John?
It's
Please,
good.
is that good?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here are two reels. Reels are fast dances in 4/4 time. So for anybody wants all the music gen on this, and very often, I mean, we've had Kayleys and music and people dancing around the kitchen here, so it's in the right setting anyway. Thank you. Now, I suppose I'll come back to this position again for a few minutes and just to say a few words about the fiddle, the Irish fiddle. It's actually the same. You can play classical music on this. This is a violin or a fiddle. And the most interesting thing I found when I was looking for information that might strike a chord, sorry for the ball, with people on the other side of the Atlantic is the huge influence that recordings had on this side of the Atlantic when they came over in the period just coming up to World War II. The Sligo fiddlers in particular, so they would be James Morrison, Michael Coleman, Paddy Cloran, people who were born in the 1890s and who were active in the music scene in the 1920s and 30s and so on. And there were several record companies in New York, particularly. There was Crown, Shannon, Metro, loads of these companies who recorded Irish music. And the recordings made their way back home. Now, I'll mention that in another context later because there's a fabulous series. And if you like, I can email you a list of sources and places where I got my information. Bringing it all back home, a series that took place, a 5-part television series in 1995, was absolutely amazing because it traced the music from our side over and back again, and how people discovered that songs that they had been singing all their lives actually had roots in Ireland, and things like that. So these 3 fiddlers became really important, and their music came back across the Atlantic to us. It was a bit of a double-edged sword. Some people heard their music and thought, oh, I'm not good. I don't think I want to play again. Other people were absolutely fascinated and only played the set tunes that they played in the same way and copied them exactly, with the result that a lot of, I suppose, local styles began to decline, but that would have happened anyway with the arrival of mass media and so on. There's a fabulous book. There's not much point, I suppose, in holding it up, but here it is. It's called Irish Traditional Music, and it's by a man called Professor Gearóid O'Halloran, and I think he's at Concordia now in Canada at the moment, a concertina player from County Clare as well, and very interesting what he has to say about how Irish music came from the kitchens and the crossroads of the west of Ireland right over to the studios and concert halls of the New World. And while he explains that this also was augmented then by the further developments in mass media, in travel, and in the World Wide Web, and so on. So I suppose I'm rabbiting on quite a bit now. So every so often I'd probably say something because I haven't really done something exactly like this before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play another type of dance tune. Most of our tunes are really intended for dancing. So you have to imagine that you can see people whirling around doing a sort of, Cayley dancing or grouped, in twos behind me, circling around. So I'm going to play, actually this time I'm going to play a jig, or 2 jigs, one after the other. And these 2 jigs are called the Halloween and the Gubon jig and the Halloween jig. So now. So, so thanks, John. So those were jigs, 6/8 time, and lively dance pieces usually. Although in the 20th century, the dance music became, I suppose, separated on the concert stage. Although you had two modes. Then you had the dance music in its original habitat, in the kitchen and the crossroads, and then you had it on the concert stage and in the studio. Um, just when I was reading up on how those original recordings in 78 got over here, I found out that a man by the name of Gerard Donovan from West Cork, who was working for O'Byrne DeWitt, which was one of the companies involved in making the recordings, had actually crossed the Atlantic over and back from the States with those 78s more than 20 times. This is before World War II, so way before, I suppose, aviation as what would you say, normal aviation as we would know it had begun. So it's fascinating looking back. So really, bringing it all back home, that series in 1995, that's the place to go if you want a view of how all this back and forth and how the music made its way, which is it contains within itself a social history really, of the people and of the displacement and of what happened. I suppose the biggest event which feeds into this is the Great Famine of 1845 to 52, although the big year was 1847. There was a famine, sorry, there was a potato blight. This was the cause of the famine here. Although, how do you say, it's a moot point. We were raising other crops that could have been used, but were being exported because that was the political situation at the time. So the peasants or the ordinary people were living on the potato, and particularly in the west of Ireland, it had a devastating effect. So people were generally, I suppose, the main thing was people, the language, I suppose, language, politics, demographics, everything changed after the Great Famine. There was a 20 to 25% drop in population through death or emigration, and it certainly coloured the rest of the 19th century. Um, I suppose when you think about it, it's a kind of a sort of a trail that we kind of originally thought was only one way, but then we've sort of in many years later, we're seeing that a lot of the influences, when it was possible to come back, and to travel back and forward, a lot of the music did manage to, you know what I mean? The music became a link between people. I'm thinking of a very interesting song called Kilkelly, which you may see in that series if you look it up. And Kilkelly is a place in Mayo, but it's also the name of a song which was made up or which was pieced together by the letters of immigrants from a particular family. And basically you hear them in the different verses asking for news of home and who's married, who's died, and who's who's going to come over next. The big thing was, of course, to send over the money for the passage for the next person in the family who would be coming over. Where we live here, the Blasket Islands are just off the coast, up the road here, a couple of miles. And a famous woman who lived there, Peg Sayers, well, she was born on the mainland and she hoped to follow her friend to America. And the friend was meant to earn the money to send back to her so she could go over. But there was some slip between the cup and the lip, and the friend wasn't able to make the money. And she ended up instead marrying a local man and moving to the island. So there are so many stories. I think maybe I will go at this point with a slow air. And this one is called Bran. And it refers to a crossing of the Atlantic, but maybe several hundreds of years earlier on. We have lots of, what would I say, myths and legends. And one of the abiding ones, which Tim Severan set out to emulate in 1976 in the Brendan Voyage, is that mariners or sailors from this part of the world could have made it across to North America already in the 7th century. And this is a fascinating story all in its own right. Now, I have the book here, The Brendan Voyage by Tim Severan. It's probably not much use to you trying to hold it up like this, but you can see there is such a book, The Brendan Voyage, Tim Severan, who only passed away recently. And it's amazing how they read the manuscripts and constructed the boat. And after 13 months at sea, they made landfall in, I think it was, I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but it would have been someplace in very far, well, fairly far north anyway. So I'm going to play a tune which I wrote around that series, or well, what would I say, around that story really, and it's called Bran, Bran. Some people may be aware of this story in the Christianized context. I mean, it's the same story, whatever way you look at it. It's either St. Brendan and the monks or Bran in the older version. So you can just see it's the same tale. So for the earlier crossing of the Atlantic, I'll go for the Voyage of Bran, slow air. Thanks very much, John. So you have to imagine that there's strings behind that and accompaniment and so on. But then again, I'm kind of happy to actually play the tune just as it sort of arrived. Or sometimes these tunes just come into your head, and you know it's very interesting just pairing things back. Can you see me better there now?
Yes.
That's good. Um, so where was I there? About crossing the Atlantic and the monks in the 7th century, and then the 19th century. There isn't all that much that I can remember about crossing the Atlantic between the 7th and the 19th century, but certainly there was a huge influence on the social history of here. And just noticed there that your president the other day, that he mentioned that his ancestors had arrived on a coffin ship. Now, in case people are interested to know what a coffin ship was, well, there's a book here, William Henry, The Coffin Ship, The Wreck of the Brig St. John. And again, it's not great to show, but I mean, it'll just show you, gives you the idea. These were basic boats and they were packed full of people. And, you know, when you think of refugees and immigrants, you know, in this day and age, you know, um, again, they were paying money to make a very long voyage and no certainty of making it across and weather-wise, and certainly in terms of disease and everything else. You know, it was an amazing thing that so many people actually managed to get across, and not only that, but to do well for themselves and make some kind of a life. I think one of the things is that what they brought with them to sustain them. I mean, they didn't have any records or I mean, what could you bring in a boat like that? I mean, all they had was their traditions and their music and their ability to communicate. And you know, when they managed, in many cases, people weren't able to read or write before they left. And over a period of time, then they might send a letter back. There also might be language difficulties. And very often, then the local schoolmaster, a priest, or somebody who had education, had formal education, would help with dictating the letters. Or with reading the letters out to the people to whom they'd been sent. Um, so that's that whole business of the famine is very interesting. Around the same time in 1995, there was a seminar on lots of people got very het up about it at the time. It was about modern influences in traditional Irish music, and should we be allowing this kind of thing at all? And you know, and there were battle lines drawn up, I suppose, on both sides, and people saying, "Oh, it has to stay the way it has stayed for millennia," and then other people saying, "But no, I mean, like it's a living music and it's a living River, that's another thing I'm going to mention, River of Sound, which dated from around the same time, a 7-part television series by a man called Micheál O'Sullivan, who sadly died there a year or two ago. But that also looked at how you can't really just say that a tradition is ever static. It's like a river and it's moving, and there's all kinds of influences and tributaries flowing into it. So there was a big conference about all of that, and the proceedings of the conference were published. And I think once it was aired in public, people kind of calmed down about it after. And, they didn't see it, it wasn't seen as so much a threat as a natural thing, that the music is open to influences and it makes its own way. Whatever we might think we're doing in it, it seems to decide its own path. And tunes that people like will survive. Other tunes might fall by the wayside. Maybe 20 years later, somebody else would say, gosh, wait, I tell you, I heard this wonderful tune, And, so things have their time and place, and they sometimes appear again many years later. So one person I should mention to you about, this is all about collecting music now, a very influential man who left West Cork, and when he was 16 years of age, he started off as a sailor and he became an educator, and eventually he ended up as chief superintendent of police in Chicago between 1901 and 1905. And his name was Francis O'Neill. And he wrote 2 very, very important books in 1903 and 1907, the Music of Ireland and the Dance Music of Ireland. And he was a gifted amateur flute player, and he had a wealth of tunes, but he also knew that there were so many people who were coming over from Ireland, and that he was able to make contact with them. I mean, the joke was that if you landed in Chicago and you were a trad player, you had a very good chance of a job in police, And so he collected so many tunes, and I have an edition of the book here. Again, it's one that came out in 1976, so it is a kind of an amalgam of a few things. And again, I might just see if I can show it to you. But it is a very thick tome, if you like, and this is all full of music, all these tunes. Now, the thing about it was that, for many people, I mean, it is basically, the music is an oral tradition, and it's passed down basically through imitation and through learning by ear. But as well as that, I suppose one of the modernizations which has occurred is that more people have become able to read music and able to write music. And it's really, really interesting to look back and see what were the hit tunes of the day in 1903 or 1907, and what's still going, and who were the people who had an influence, and can you detect regional styles? And so there's a lot of things like that going on. So now I'm going to do something very untraditional, and I'm going to play a piece of mine called the Mystic Slipjigs. This is another type of dance. It's a dance in 9/8 time. And so it's dumpty diddle dee diddle dee 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 is the rhythm. But I decided that I wanted to try some other influences in it. So I picked a key which is not really flavor of the month for trad players, F sharp minor, for anybody who's interested. And anyway, see what you make of this. It's kind of it has the rhythm all right, but it kind of has other influences in it. And now. So thanks very much, John. So you can see many people who grew up here in the 60s and 70s would have had a very broad range of music in their experience. Um, as I said, I grew up in Dublin, but I grew up in a bilingual family, and I went to an Irish medium school. So we learned our subjects through the medium of Irish, or the Irish language. And we would have been, we were mad into rock music and pop music. And I also studied classical music. And trad music was a kind of social thing. It was there was, of course, the Fleadh Cheoil. That's the meaning the festival of music, and those Fleadh Cheoils go on every year. The finals happen in August, and they're huge public festivals of traditional Irish music. And there's an organisation called Comhaltas Ceoltóirí Éireann, or I suppose, the Federation of Irish Musicians, which was started in the 1950s, and they have provided an amazing platform and education in traditional music all over the country, a great network for young players. You see children, 4, 5, 6, going to sessions, and the session is just an informal gathering where people can participate and can try out their tunes. And anyway, the Fleadh Cheoil has various heats and rounds, and you'd have the local one and the county one and the provincial one, and then usually in August every year, some small town is taken over for a long weekend, and people come from all over with their instruments, even if they're not participating in it, particularly if they're not participating in the competitions. There's a sort of a vibrant street life culture that goes with the Fleadh Cheoil. Anybody who's interested in the spelling, Fleadh, which is like a festival or a feast of music, and that happens usually in August each year. I suppose it's hard to know how things will eventually settle down with the pandemic. I mean, some changes. You're trying to think ahead and figure out what will be more permanent and what won't. I suppose situations like this where people talk about music and play music would probably be, I kind of feel this has all happened almost overnight, but of course the groundwork has been laid for it for a long time. But certainly, I hadn't. If you'd asked me a year ago, would I be playing from the kitchen in West Kerry for an audience in North America, I wouldn't have given it a hope. So yeah, it is quite a change, because the music is a very social thing. And the great thing about Ireland, I've often been told this in Europe, like when we'd be playing music in, we'd say Germany, for example, people think that, when they hear about Ireland, that it's absolutely out of the ordinary, an amazing thing that young children, like all children in school, will learn an instrument or play the whistle at least, they'll play at least one thing. Um, and you don't have to be a designated musician. Everybody seems to be a musician in Ireland, so if people say to me. And yeah, there is a very strong social background there. It may not be available to everybody. I was very fortunate, I suppose. Certainly, it has broadened my horizons amazingly. And when I think that, some people would say, "Oh, it's very insular. Oh, you're doing Irish music." And the strange thing about it is that it has proven to be a path to meet up with people who play music of all types and all kinds, and to represent the music in some way. It's bigger than any one individual player, so you get to meet other people and to communicate through music with them. And I find that one of the most rewarding parts. I mean, the music itself, obviously, but it's lovely to be able to have the other side of that as well, where people will come up to you and tell you about a particular piece, what it means to them, what it meant to them, and the anecdotes that go with the story. So I'm probably giving you loads of anecdotes, which is the usual kind of thing, I suppose, that, the music does have a social context. So I thought at this stage that maybe I might sing a song um, in the Irish language. And that's something which your listeners may not all that often get a chance to hear. You'll notice, for a start, it isn't really like English. You can't make out much of the words, I suppose. I was thinking of singing a nice love song called Bandov Ilana, which is Ban is a woman and Bandov is a woman with black hair. So the dark haired woman from the Glen, Bandov Ilana. I'll just put this down for a second. Tá bógam slíomh, agus táim leis amdíag, ó chaile sumhió leanóchar. Sa seola sy'r siar in sgachad gong yn irion o fardyn sgwmwyn si tramon. Noir a uwch yn pein yn ôl, it's not a milch morwn. Rhaen am hwn, sorry in Goforides moch, mar si yn fanlwf o'n iawn, o'i filoig me. Bandolf Ilana, on Bandolf Barrow, Bandolf Voyage, Abi Marnalo, so Breatnach, so kaum schauen geschehen oin. Nilo gano kailki o valatlia kugaluf masut gotu mi varu ma fulgio satarin achiv baum dasu is the tnu leis of Thank you. So traditional music and traditional song are very strong in this area. And you may have noticed there that I closed my eyes. That's, I suppose it's almost like a trance thing when you go into those songs, because you're really voicing something that's been in the ether for so long. It's like you're joining yourself to a kind of a, I don't know, an invisible iCloud of some kind, and you're singing away. And those songs have been sung for generations. And it's something I took a huge interest in myself, and I did some studying on the transmission of songs, and particularly why people are interested. There's a huge interest in that kind of singing called sean-nós singing, SEAN-NO with a stroke over the OS. and it means old style singing. And not just in Ireland, but in many countries throughout the world, people take an interest and attend and have attended workshops, festivals, and I suppose still online now are interested in the songs, not just because they may have an ancestral connection to Ireland, but very often because something in the song strikes a chord with them internally, that they feel some kind of emotion or some kind of a healing or some kind of connection with the song. And in many cases, it leads to a lifelong interest. I know many singers from the United States who, some of whom do have a connection to Ireland, others who don't at all, and have learned to sing this style of singing. Mostly the songs, although there are some fast songs, mostly they're kind of what you would maybe say are contemplative, slow like slow airs, and they draw you in. There's several more verses there, but I decided to kind of do the short version, the two verses of it. It's an unrequited love song, so there a lot of them are about those kind of subjects. Some of them are about immigration. Some of them are about local history, maybe to do with events that took place in the 19th century. Um, there are light-hearted ones and plenty of children's songs as well. There used to be work songs, but I think as work songs they don't exist anymore. But the kind of songs that you could sing to keep the spirits up while you'd be churning the butter and folding the tweed and doing all these hard menial jobs and needing a bit of encouragement and group encouragement to keep going. That's also that tradition would be in Scotland as well, in the Scottish Gaelic areas and the islands of Scotland. Um, so how's that so far, John? I mean, how do you? I mean, I have other things to be saying, but give me a steer if I'm going off
Oh,
where you.
you're doing fantastic. I'm loving every minute of it.
Okay, well, just in case you think at any point, like come back on track, let me know. um, so what else was I going to say? Yeah, about the tradition. This, I suppose, Ireland is the centre of gravity of the tradition still, but it has migrated and it's gone across the world, as everybody knows. And particularly in, I suppose, in North America, it has developed in other ways, and many it's been a melting pot. For yourselves, I'm sure that Irish music has joined in with many other styles of music, and um, people say, "Oh, it's our tune." Oh no, well, I mean, we had it first, but not in any kind of a contentious way. Um, I'm trying to think now of something that might. Oh yes, I need to play another form of a tune, a hornpipe. The hornpipe is in 4/4 time, and it's like the reel, but it's not as fast, and it's a hard shoe dance. So if you imagine somebody dancing on a wooden floor or on a half door or something that you could take down, and you'll have the clickety clackety clickety clack. I'm just doing it on the tiles on the floor here. um, and the hornpipe is a popular dance. It was one of the showpieces that the old dancing masters in the 19th century would have taught their students. There was a great movement in the 19th century of traveling dancing masters. And they'd go around and they'd go from one place to another, and there'd be great excitement, and the neighbours would gather in, and they'd get lodgings. They might have to stay in the barn, but it was still grand, and they'd teach dancing, and there'd be an exhibition maybe of dancing at the end of a week or 2 weeks. And the hornpipe was a solo dance usually, which people could learn, and they'd learn to show off fancy footwork. Now, there are lots of different styles of Irish dance. I mean, you know about probably the Irish dance, the North American Irish Dance Championships and all that kind of thing. This now wouldn't have been anything as formal or as organized, maybe, but some of the steps continued down and the basic movements. And there is a sean-nós dancing as well as the sean-nós singing that I gave the example of. And the sean-nós dancing is particular little micro movements, if you like. So they'd be small tickety tack, or diddle 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 da, and you would be using the feet in whatever way for those movements. And people, particularly in the west of Ireland, have that tradition still of being able to do extempore dancing. So they have all these little, if you like, little sections that they can thread together whatever way they like, as long as they fit into the musical frame. So that's kind of a background. You can have a very highly polished hornpipe with the steps absolutely organized and pinned down in advance, or you can have people dancing their own steps made up of these little elements, which, what would you say, give a good, that's a pity I'm not wearing more suitable shoes, but anyway, give a good tap on the floor. So I'll play a hornpipe now just to give you an idea. Thanks very much, John. So, yeah, the kind of style I play is a mix and gather. As I mentioned, with the advent of mass media and more mobility and I suppose recordings and all that kind of thing, styles that would have been, separate, discrete entities began to, I suppose, just die out, and all new influences were coming in, particularly all during the 20th century. Certainly from the 30s and 40s on. And I suppose the styles that we did have, or the ones that have survived strongest up to today, well, obviously the Sligo fiddlers had a huge influence, and you can listen to their recordings still. So they were very, very influential. The Donegal fiddle style, very influential as well. It's a more separate bow. So if I just, what do I say? It's more like. Much more up, down bowing in the Donegal style. Now, I know this is probably a travesty. I'm probably reducing it to a very small element, but I suppose you would notice that a lot of open strings and, two notes playing together, like double stopping, that kind of thing. Then when you come down the coast to Clare, it's more a smoother style of playing, really. And I suppose I would have played with a lot of people from Clare when I was growing up, so I think I have some elements of that. Nothing would be complete, however, without mentioning the local polkas and slides. Polkas and slides are the big thing in Kerry, and again for the set dancing. And yeah, you when you're playing a polka or you're playing a slide, you have to imagine that you can see the couples swirling around, the four couples swirling around and doing the various figures of the dance. Um, so I will end up playing when I get to when I finally get myself organized. I will play polkas and slides. Um, I'm just trying to think, was there anything hugely else that I've missed mentioning? Would you like to prompt me there, John, if there's anything you think I should have gotten to and haven't?
I think you're being very comprehensive.
That's very good of you. Um, what did I say? I suppose the main thing I'm trying to get across anyway is that there is a very strong tradition, but there's also flexibility. And I think that flexibility is what's helped the music to grow and survive, because it isn't brittle. It is very much open to other influences. And where we live is an Irish speaking area mainly. So, I mean, obviously there are people speak English as well, but it is the main language. It's a Gaeltacht area, Gaeltacht. And so the language of school, the language of the community is the Irish language. Now, at this point in time, such areas are mostly on the west coast of Ireland. So again, the demographic and the linguistic changes that happened from the middle of the 19th century have had a very far-reaching effect. And many people, because they had to emigrate, would probably, their relatives would have wanted to have given them some basic English before they left, because they would have thought, well, what's the point? For musicians, it's been a strange experience, I suppose, because there are so many musicians who want to make a living out of it in Ireland that it's not possible for everybody to stay here. So we have a kind of a serial migration, if you like, or a seasonal migration. Now, you might have heard about the potato pickers in Scotland that go from the west of Ireland, and sometimes they're called the tatey hokers, and they would have lived in bothies. So bothy comes from bohan or bothon in Irish, which is a small hut. And there was a band here, the Bothy Band, which took off in the 1970s, a music band, and took its name from that tradition. So there would have been the tradition of migrant labour going over to Scotland to do work like that. But the musicians, I like to think of it as a seasonal migration to Europe, particularly to festivals during the summer, and to arts venues and small clubs and theatres on the continent of Europe. So we do, I suppose, we still have our travel, well, hopefully that will come back, but there still is this leaving the country, but at least more of a chance of coming back now than there would have been in the literature. I mean, there's a fantastic literature from the Blasket Islands, all the books from the Blasket Islands that came out of those islands at the beginning of the 20th century. They've been translated. The Island Man by Thomas O'Crohan, and also 20 Years of Growing by Máire Breatnach, Fihibli and Foss. This literature is there, and you can see in it how people, when they left, they were gone. That was it, So at least we have more of a chance of having a two-way traffic in this day and age. So I suppose I will finish up with a couple of polkas, and I might even get to as far as a slide. The polkas, wait till I see now, what ones will I do? Because I wasn't thinking ahead as far as the polkas, but I kind of thought, well, it'll come to me. So I'll go for a couple of polkas and then I'll go into a slide. So now make that a bit better like that. So John, I think I've kind of come to a point where I don't know what to do next. So at this point, I think I'll ask you what I should be doing next.
But would you like to take a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay, I think my students have a couple questions for you.
Hello, my name is Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
My question for you is, did anyone influence you to play the fiddle?
When I was about 6 years old, my dad worked in a music school building, and he was the fixer upper, the maintenance man. And I used to wait there for him to bring me home from school, and because it was a long bus journey. And one day I was sitting there on the seat, swinging my feet, and the principal of the school came down. I didn't know he was the principal, and he chatted to me and he asked me, was I interested in music? He first, I think he said, what goes on here? You know, do you know this place? And I said, oh, it's a music school, and they all sing, yo, woo, and so on, because you could hear all the singers practicing. And he said, do you want to learn music yourself? And I said, something like that. Or would you like to learn? And I said, yeah, and there's a brilliant violin, and it's I saw it in the window of such and such a shop, and because being 6, you know what I mean, I sort of thought I'd push out the boat. And this was a gorgeous looking fiddle, and it was it was all, I suppose it was a basic one that had, you know, it was a lacquered kind of a fiddle anyway, and it was shop window, and I thought it was the business. And anyway, he said, well, he said, we'll see about that. And then a couple of months later, I found at home, when I was rummaging through a cupboard, I found a small, tiny violin for a kid. And I found out years later that he had gone and borrowed one for me, because at that time you couldn't get small violins like children's violins in Ireland very easily. You could, but I mean, it was a big effort, and they weren't mass produced, or they didn't arrive in mass produced lots like they would now. And it was through his generosity that I started to learn the violin. And that was a classical school of music. But I went to an Irish language school, and they had, I suppose you would say, sessions and programs and things like that. So that's how I started to play music.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I am Luke
Hello.
Schumann. My question is, what inspired you to write your first book?
Oh, which book? This is my first book. The Vera and her violin, that one in Irish, the Irish one.
Yeah, that one.
That one. Right. Okay. Again, it was part of my experience that I was talking to, saying to Andrew there, that um, it's like that, the same story, but it's slightly different, in that there's a small child who wants to learn to play the violin, and goes with the mother to visit the music teacher, and to, I suppose, to get a sort of a sense or a feeling for the instrument and the people, and you know what it's going to be like to go for music lessons. I mean, it's different to my experience, in that I went to a big music school building, but it was a very personal thing at the same time, because the teacher, my violin teacher, was called Miss Green, Clara Green, and she was very open to all styles of music. And particularly because at that time, when I started going to her, it wasn't the thing that, you know, people didn't really have an openness to different styles. You either played classical or traditional, was the sort of attitude people had. And it's only then, since the 1970s, 80s, you know, things have opened up an awful lot more, and people realize that you won't ruin your style of music by playing different types of music, you know. So I suppose that kind of experience was what I was trying to portray, and that the kid is going up to meet this person, and trying to sort of make some kind of common cause.
Right on. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Carolina, and my question for you is, who has been your favorite musician to work with?
Oh, that's a difficult question, because I've played music with lots of people. I'm trying to think. I have to think for a minute. I don't know if I can say one favorite musician, but I can say lots of people. For example, Christy Moore has been brilliant to play music with. Um, I enjoyed doing the river dance shows. I was in that from the beginning time of it, and I suppose the group experience of being able to play something which is rooted in the tradition, but is also has a great modern sound to it, was something very, that meant a lot to me. So I suppose if you asked me to single it out, it wouldn't be any one musician in Riverdance, but it would have been the group of us when we were all playing together. There was 11 of us in the original outfit that started off like, first of all, before it took off, and then when it was first of all an interval act in the Eurovision Song Contest, and then it became a show, and then there were 11 of us touring. So I suppose if I was to think of something that was really exciting because of all the different influences in it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Seth, and my question for you is, what effect has music had on you, and how has it shaped you?
It's opened the world up to me, really. I never thought of it that way when I was young. I mean, I thought it was you have to do your practice and that kind of way. But it has given me opportunities to travel and meet people and go places, and I suppose I'm not saying it's not it's hard life. It's a strange kind of a life in a way. I mean, I trained to be a teacher, a school teacher as well, but I think that it's given me a broader life than I would have had otherwise. I've been able to move around more. There's a lot of sitting around and waiting and doing nothing. So, you kind of have to figure out, it puts a lot of onus and responsibility on you to try and find something fruitful to do with all the downtime, So, you might decide nowadays, maybe it's different with like internet, but when I would have started out, it would have been like, I used to bring loads of books everywhere with me, or, something so that I knew that I could be, if I had to stay at a hotel room like for hours and end, I'd have something that I wasn't depending on what might be on the telly, or, so it certainly has given me a breadth of experience of life that I wouldn't have expected, because before I started out in it, looking at it now,
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Emily, and my question for you is, do you prefer to sing in Irish in your songs?
hang on a second, that went a bit funny there. Do I prefer to sing in Irish?
Yes.
Just say it again for me.
Do you prefer to sing?
Yeah. Do I prefer to sing in Irish, in the Irish language? It's the connection is going a little bit funny, I think, maybe. Anyway, yes, I do prefer to sing in Irish because I find it, the words of the songs have a poetry in them that I don't know, there's just something about them that I prefer. I think in English I'm more self-conscious. I don't know, it just seems to me that with the Irish songs, it's easier to they turn into a kind of a meditation, or they just sort of tend to kind of spool themselves along, It's a strange thing. In English, I think I'm more self-conscious. I don't know why that is, but I just think so. Does that answer it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Josie, and I was wondering, how does the music industry in Ireland differ from the music industry around the world?
Oh, well, now I have to try and think that one out. Obviously, it's a smaller pool here. And well, all the styles of music would be represented here. I mean, we have our own country and Irish stuff, you know. So you know, there's everything that you could find anywhere else. It's on a smaller scale, obviously. But there's the one thing I would say that's much different here is that the same musicians often play lots of different styles of music. Like many people grow up playing, you know, they might be in a rock band, but they also play trad music or classical music. And I didn't sort of find that in other countries. You know, people tended to be in their pigeonhole, like, or they used to, you know, they'd say, oh, I only play, or I play whatever, you know, but they wouldn't see themselves as crossover artists. Whereas here, there's a lot more of that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Moira, as we start to wrap up this amazing session, do you find when you're performing and you have Americans in the audience that they tend to ask you to play the same numbers, like Tura Lura and Danny Boy?
Well, yeah, sometimes, and we do our best. While sort of trying to lead them along other paths less traveled, and sort of saying, well, you mightn't have heard this, but you might find it interesting, or if you like such and such, well, here's something from the same vintage, or, you know. And particularly here around Dingle, when we do have the concerts that we have in the music shop in Dingle, which is something, actually, if anybody's interested, it's a lovely little tiny little music shop. And if you look on the internet for Josephine's Waltz, you'll see me, but you'll also see a group of European musicians from Holland, actually. And we all played this tune, Josephine's Waltz. It's not an Irish tune as such, but if you give you an idea of all the different influences that come together. So it's, what do I say? It's about 3 minutes long. But yeah, we do have concerts there, and a lot of Americans come, obviously, and they do have their favorites, but we tell them about all the other music as well. You know, we try and get them all interested about other things too.
What do you have a number you can close for us?
Yeah. Yes, she said, and thought really quickly. While I'm standing up, I'll think. Now. Right, I'm going to play 2 jigs, one after the other.
Well, Moira, this has been such a treat. You have entertained us, you have educated us. You did everything I had possibly hoped for and more. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, John, and also to your students and anybody else who's been listening to the session.
And we hope one day we're going to try and talk you into coming over here in the States.
Wow. Yeah. Well, gosh, it'd be lovely.
Well, let's do that one day. Máire, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody there and everybody who facilitated making it happen. And I'll send you an email with those references if anybody wants to look them up.
That'll be great. Thank you again.
Thanks. Bye.